the government should have seen this coming long ago and been preparing for it. So to go round up agitators or people who are protesting because they can't even live and don't have enough food, that's a no-no right there.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Yet on the other side, over on the West Coast, it's warm. So when you see these colliding air masses, which we saw over Asia, Northern Asia, you could see where these colliding air masses were going to be of extreme cold on one side of 25 degrees below normal temperatures, and then on the other side, like 15 degrees Fahrenheit above normal temperatures. And where that line was very distinct, it made like a ribbon rope in the atmosphere. You could actually see it. That's for the 5+ feet of snow dropped over Qinghai in China. As I was looking up these stories, I came across a really interesting blog post on notrickszone.com. And what they were showing is, according to the recent paper by Qiu Jinzhan, extreme precipitation events in China have declined over 90% since 1961, meaning that it's getting drier in China. And this matches up perfectly with the 400-year cycle, at least 400 years, because every grand solar minimum, the Chinese dynasties collapse due to the exact same events. They can't feed their people, there's drought, and the emperors change. Now, just if you're a history buff, I encourage you to try to find fault in my statement here. There's never been any Chinese dynasty ever that's lasted more than 400 years. And once you start to put these heavy events of the grand solar minimum on the 400-year time scale, you start to go, whoa, that matches perfectly. And that's exactly what I did. I matched up the GISP ice core data with the collapse of the Chinese dynasties, and they match up perfectly where the larger drop-offs in temperature are. Well, this new paper now puts those large drop-offs in temperature equal massive drought in northern China, central China, and that's exactly where they're growing crops. Now add into this today's world where we have all these trade tariffs, and everywhere you look in the news, every headline is about China food, America food, China food. Why is that? Every time you look at China and America, they're feuding. It's about food. And here is the nail in the coffin, if you will, proving that China dries out into pretty dry conditions in the grand solar minimums. And guess where we are? Heading into another grand solar minimum right now. So I could see why Xi Jinping, the leader of that country, has turned into a new dictator himself. He's turned into a new emperor. The control of social media there is beyond anything Orwellian. Orwell would be like, oh my God, I can't even believe that it's possible. Orwell would have to rewrite his books just for this case study in China. Social credit scores. You're not allowed to share any types of weather information across the social media that hasn't been first verified and put into a approved news source. Because if I share a snowstorm, for example, that snowstorm that just happened in Qinghai, if I don't pull from a source off the state-run media like CCTV or something, if I post my own video and my own images of my own village or town that hasn't been reported on in the local news first, that is illegal. All this censorship going on in China across everything. Well, they've been pretty censorship about, the politics, political views, religious views, etc. Understood. They're trying to keep almost 1.5 billion people together peacefully, harmonious society. But when it comes down to them banning weather information, you know, and I know for sure that the reason they're banning and making spreading of weather events illegal is because they're coming back in the grand solar minimum and they don't want people sharing the crop losses. When the government says they're having a bumper harvest and you show images of dried out fields with very little yield coming out of there, that goes directly against what was reported in the approved media. So what are you going to believe? Your own eyes? You're going to believe a fake news headline from CCTV. So China's already bracing itself. It knows what's going to happen there. I mean, it happens every grand solar minimum. China collapses, period. I could see why they're over in North Africa with all the rail lines out to the deserts where the deserts are now blooming again. They're going to grow food out there and send it back to China because they're absolutely going to lose the northern regions of grow zones. This last article here, I encourage you. And it is called, here, I'll read the title for you. You need to read this one. When you read this, everything's going to fall into place. And it's really like the last piece of the puzzle to click. And once you see it, you'll understand why all the news is happening with China and all the trade wars and all this stuff is smoke and mirrors. And you will see this last piece and it will be crystal clear. You will be able to pull the curtain back and see what's behind it. It's called Extreme Precipitation Events in China and Australia show no increase at all over the past decades. And also the paragraph that introduces what the abstract is about also talks about the authors find the probability of rainy days has decreased over time for over 90% of the surface area of China. And the extreme precipitation events and annual precipitation has decreased for most of the area in China. Understand what that means as we move into this grand solar minimum. It's going to get drier there. And not a little bit drier, like significantly much drier. If they're not able to grow their crops, they're going to have 1.5 billion hungry people. China can only control food prices so much. Their economy is imploding as we speak. They're having street protests due to decreasing real estate values. The students who even have PhDs can't find jobs. If you have a master's degree, good luck. You are like 16 millionth in line to get anything. The students are barely struggling living at home with their parents. If they are living and have some job, it is a very low wage because it is so competitive that people will take literally anything at subsistence level just to get out of the house and get to a city and work. They will take the wages are ridiculous, like $1,000, $1,200 US a month for a doctor and thing. It's crazy how low the wages are there. It's just such a vast labor pool clamoring over each other's backs to get a job, at any pay. I will take anything. And work is the mentality. It works at today's price levels, but if food doubles in price, those people who live in the cities are not going to be able to afford it. And they're going to be on the streets too. And they're going to be the younger generation. Now, the protests right now, the street protests in Beijing, I might add, Beijing street protests, these are the older people who are complaining about real estate values falling. Because so many developers built all this stuff and then they kept like 80% of those things unoccupied just to drive the prices up. And now when people want to sell, the developers are the first ones out there flogging off all these empty apartments that they were holding for so long. Encouraged by the government, of course. In cahoots with, because you have to have government approval to get the permits to build these new buildings. So now what's happening is the new buildings that are going up for sale, the people who bought at a high price can't sell because the prices that the new empty rooms or empty apartments are selling for are like 30 to 40% lower than. And they're like, wait a second, you kind of scammed us. You told us it was this price, and now you held all these apartments, and you're trying to sell them at a 40% discount. Well, we can't even sell ours now. Thank you. So when you got people with money in the older generation that has a lot of wealth, and they have political power too. They're out on the streets protesting. This is the older generation, 50, 60, 70-year-olds. But then you got the whole younger generation that can't find work, and they're pissed. They are absolutely just so ferociously angry at the moment. It's just boiling under the surface of that country. Just so, like literally, it's one, like little tiniest of a rice plant, dried, ready to snap. And when that unleashes, oh my gosh, you are going to see such a quick change. They're going to walk down the machine guns and be like, we're changing this. When their food prices increase, China's finished. And this brings me, the reason I talk about that is their food prices are increasing right now, and it's going to continue to increase. Their stock market's in a free fall because to get all those loans for those dodgy buildings, everybody was putting collateral as their stock for their company to go ahead and get loans to be able to invest in the buildings and build out other things, right? So let's say I give you 100,000 shares of my company that was listed on like the Shanghai A exchange. And I would use that for collateral on a building or a loan on some business debt to expand. Well, now those loans are coming due and they're like, all right, we need our money back, the loan's due. And they're like, okay. But when they go to sell off their stocks, those 100,000 shares are only worth less than 50% what they were when that collateral loan was pledged. That collateralization of those shares pledged at that time was literally double the value it is now. So even if they sell 100,000 shares, they only have half the money to pay anything back. So the government's stepping in because this is a runaway happening everywhere across China. Their stock market is literally 1/5 of 1/8 of a fraction away from imploding in itself. So you got like these three things going on over there. And then the food price is going to rise and it's going to continue to get drier and drier in China. And their food's going to get costing more and they're going to need more imports. But at the same time, think about the rest of the world. China's just one country that's going to have trouble growing food. America, Canada, Russia, Europe, Australia, South Africa, parts of Argentina, parts of Brazil, they're all having difficulty right now. They've all had crop losses this year. So as we move forward, those yields are going to decline as well. So where's China going to go buy everything from that they need? In a short answer, they're not. What do you think is going to happen? Now all the saber rattling starts. How much new saber rattling have you seen in the last, say, 2 months? I'm going to say it's a direct causation because they want wars, because it's the first time I'm really I've been working on a couple ideas for an article, so this is my first time talking about it, trying to mentally get it together. China's going to have millions and millions and millions of younger men and women on the streets asking for change as the food prices rise. Well, what's the quickest way to get rid of them? Send them off to war. America is going to have millions of people on the streets asking for change when their food assistance is not enough to meet the basic need. They're going to be agitators. How do you get rid of them? You start the draft and send them off to war. If they get killed, doesn't matter. You're trying to get rid of them anyway. From the government's perspective, I personally don't approve of that. But you can see where it's all ending up. They're going to have to try to move the agitators away from and get them out of the country. And what's the best way to do that? Because imagine in America, okay, there's 1 million street protesters out there, and they're all protesting about high food prices and the basic assistance on the food programs is not enough to meet the basic needs. Are you going to be able to just round them up in a net and throw them in jail in a FEMA camp somewhere? I don't think so, because I would be staunchly against that. I would be like, no, you're going to let them out of there. You are not going to do that. I would be totally against rounding people up because they're protesting food prices. The government should have seen this coming long ago and been preparing for it. So to go round up agitators or people who are protesting because they can't even live and don't have enough food, that's a no-no right there. The blame should be pointed, fingers point back at the Congress and fingers point back straight into the government. This is not going to work. My parents would be out on the street going, you're going to let them go. For sure. And everybody I know would be the same way. There would be no way they could get away with that. But what they could get away with is, we're with this other country. We need the draft. All you guys, we'll give food to your families. We'll get you in the draft. You go over and fight, and we'll make sure your families are taken care of. You guys get to eat every day. We'll give you plenty of food, but you got to go fight. And you can see this already unfurling. I swear you can just see it tick-tock, step by step, moving down to 2020, 2021. Because I firmly say by 2021, cat's out of the bag. Everybody knows what I'm talking about, like water cooler talk. There's going to be a lot of protests. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on, and our world's going to shift in an instant. We're really at the reset button edge right now. And I hope by listening to these types of programs, myself, Christian at Ice Age Farmer, Diamond at Oppenheimer Ranch Project, Ben over at Suspicious Observers and the whole crew over there talking about electric universe and how our, the changes are here. Got Christopher over at Ice Age 2050, Pierce Corbin, John Casey, all these. There's like an enormous amount of people out there talking about this right now. David Dilley. How about the Australian forecasters? Get down there with Kevin Long. There's so much information out here right now. This is where your niche is. I'm telling you, you got to be able to find it. So if you can see a crystal ball like I can here, just use China drying out as your focal point and move from there forward. Like, what do you think they would do? Be the China government for a moment. Okay, you got citizens all over the place rioting because of food prices. Your army can't control them because you're shooting all these people, and now it's making bad news. And it's bringing to the forefront that there's food shortages in China, which will bring to the forefront food shortages in every other place, and people will start questioning, what about our food security? So it's not going to really happen where they're going to shoot everybody in China and put them all down with the army, and we're just going to sit and still buy their stuff like Tiananmen Square 2.0. That ain't happening, I assure you. There'll be too many people anyway. It'll be millions at this time, not just a few thousand students. It will be millions of protesters in these going off at the same time. What would you do? Take control of the country for a moment. What would you do before the food riots start there because of the high prices and the unemployment and the collapse of the stock market and the collapse of the housing prices? What would you do? Lead the society. This is how you see it will unfold going forward. Like, what would you really do if you had all those problems? And it's a dictatorship. It's an emperor. You say a thing and it gets done. There's none of this, we got to vote on it. It's like you say it, it happens. What would you do? And go from that point forward. But then you got to take into consideration, too, every country is going to produce less food. So then add that into the equation. Moisture patterns are shifting across the planet. Deserts are greening. Other areas are drying out on the clockwork. At least this grand solar minimum is well known, and now we got the final thing here. Now we know in the grand solar minimum, too, America is going to get drier and colder, Canada as well. Europe, especially France, Germany, and Eastern Europe, if we're anywhere close to where it was, places like Poland all the way down to Croatia, Slovenia, that area, going to just get bone-chilling cold, and the precipitation patterns are going to shift. So you can start to pick out a few of these points on the planet where they know statistically exactly what happens, and like you get drought in this area, get excessive cold winters, etc. And then put it all together and know that we're going to need to store food. And understand that what's happening in the UK is 5 times less storage than they need right now just for Brexit. And then expand that onto a global type of event where where's our food storage? How much more food storage do we need? And then you start to get a much greater picture of why all these things are happening in the news, why the media censorship's going on, why they're going to need to control the narrative moving forward. And if you're going to control the narrative moving forward as a government body, how would you employ the tech companies to do such a thing? And this is how you can wrap this up into one big piece. And then inside there, what is the need of the average person? It's kind of what it boils down to, is what is the need of the average person that's not there now that they will need to transition or move through these next few years to a decade. And there's a huge list. I found 30 some plus already that I've written down. I keep focusing on the food storage because that's one of my big ones. Indoor agriculture, food storage, long-term food storage, preparation. How do you take a product that comes from the field and then turn it into something that can last for a longer time, that can be transported more easily? That's like the long-term food storage preparation type thing. But there's many, 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 many more. People are going to need to boost the R values on their homes. I mean, all kind of stuff. That's the simplest stuff. Well, when we come to the transition in the economy, then what? Well, what are the new job sectors going to be? If people lose their jobs because they're working in an electronics store and that store goes out of business, where can those people move to? What new parts of the economy are going to expand? This is what you want to focus on, is where will the expansion start first, continue through, And that's where you want to put yourself right in the middle of. So anyway, I hope this broadcast helped you today. While you have a full plate of food, be so thankful for that. Truly just so grateful, so thankful for the food that's in front of you. I truly believe this is, one of the last years we're going to have such abundance on our planet of food. Like you will truly behold these days as truly sacred days where there's food available. Be thankful for the things you have around you, the comforts, the safety, the food, the warmth, the clothing that you have right in front of you right now, because it's so precious. Enjoy every single moment of it as we move forward. And there'll be ways to get through this, no problem. It's like going down a road that's been plowed. Stay in the plowed lane. Don't go off into the snow. And the record cold temperatures across the northeast U.S., central U.S., central Canada, all the way down to Cuba and central Mexico, going to get smashed next week. It's unbelievable in both hemispheres how it's happening. But please understand the causation. It's not because of CO2. It's the sun. Once you have the full playbook, it's going to be more of a safety manual for you than a playbook. Anyway, thanks for joining me for today. I'm David DuByne, your host, creator of the Adapt 2030 channel on YouTube, as well as the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast, available anywhere across the net. freedomslips.com, Studio A, Revolution Radio. Thank you so much.